This is the Almost Academic Podcast, episode 7.
We've gotten here.
And we are starting a little adventure, a little series
Soiree.
we're doing. We'd like to test our capability as interviewers. And we thought, this is our first choice. And nobody canceled on us. Nobody disrespected us.
Ever.
We would love to have Anthony,
Our first choice.
Sal's brother, on to talk about the various things. So, a couple interesting things about Anthony. First one, he's joining the seminary.
Yes.
And he is also a very intelligent man with a lot of nuanced opinions on multicultural world issues. And so
Very,
we'd
very
like to
nuanced
probe his
opinions.
mind in a clean way that will not get him kicked out of the
Right.
seminary.
Exactly.
Thank
you.
But we would like to just probe your brain and give you the floor and test our gamut as interviewers.
Yeah, exactly. So, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm actually his brother. So this is also.
You can't tell the schnoz
I
on
know,
these
right?
guys?
It's the same looks. So you're joining seminary.
I am joining seminary.
Which seminary?
I will be joining the southern province of the Dominicans, the province of St. Martin de Porres.
That's very nice.
Tell us a little bit about St. Martin de Porres.
St.
Porres.
Martin de Porres, which means of the poor.
That's beautiful, beautiful.
He was a saint, I believe, in the 15 or 1600s. He was also, I think, around Lima, Peru, if I'm not mistaken.
Who was
Interesting.
coincidentally the location of origin of the guy that may or may not have been the first.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's Lima, but
I did not.
It's definitely
Peru.
I did not completely look up, so this is all
Sure.
from memory.
Yeah,
so if
sure.
all of these locations
It's anecdotal.
are, yeah,
It's anecdotal.
I'll fill in any
Fill in
inaccurate
whatever.
information.
We will add a little thing,
Exactly.
But he was
Disclaimer, actually
not true.
right.
He was a brother, but at the time, actually, I don't think they allowed people of color to join.
Oh, he's a brother.
He's a brother. He is
That's
black.
what you meant.
Yeah, he is
not a brother.
is-
He was a brother.
Yeah,
He
because they were
is-
allowing. Yeah,
He is black, and he was actually the one who very much like paved the way within the order, because he was a professed brother, but displayed such like absolute incredible humility in everything he did, and obedience to everybody, like care for the poor. I think there was one time he brought in like someone who was sick, and he was taking care of them within like the priory, and one of the other like brothers was like, "Why'd you do that? Why'd you bring him in?" And he's like, "I thought this was the gospel, guys. What's the problem here?" But like in such a genuine way that the priors were like, "What an example! Like, this is a man who's actually living out what we're all called to do and to be." And his famous story, or his famous depiction, is he's usually depicted in stained glass windows with a bunch of like mice around him. And the story was that like a bunch of mice were overrunning where he was staying, and he decided to like talk to them, and he was like, "So guys, it's a little problematic that you're here giving our priory an infestation."
all right, Stuart Little.
Yeah,
You need to
Stuart
clear
Little,
out.
you and your friends gotta go. And pretty much they were like,
It's the work.
he was like, "I'll feed you guys every day if you like just stop bothering.
Leave us alone a
Yeah,
little
if you
bit,
just
please."
kind of give us some space here." So he's actually like almost always depicted with a bunch of mice because he talked to the mice. So
Friend
great
to,
saint,
friend
great
to the
saint.
poor,
Friend
and to the
poor,
mice.
and to the mice. Saint Francis who?
This might have gone.
It's okay. If there was a little...
There are mic delays.
We have
Just
mic problems.
apologies.
It's okay. Okay. Friend
I'll
of
be
mice,
diligent.
friend of the poor, and their equivalent, right, in my mind at least. I see. I'm sorry. We won't go there. It's going to be clean, right? I'm sorry. Okay. St. Martin de Porres. That's the
Please stop. Like,
the namesake of...
Christ tells me to love the poor,
Yeah.
but it's hard.
Jeez.
The namesake of the place that
We
you're
all need an
going.
example.
And
We
where
all
is
need
it?
an
Where is it
example.
located? This Dominican...
So
Seminary?
the novitiate will be in Irving, Texas, which is where the first year of kind of entering into the early kind of like prayer life, the routine, actually taking steps towards living out this vocation, being formed with the other brothers, joining, learning to pray better. And then the next 7 years are in St. Louis, which is where the Studium is, which is actually mixed with the Central Province Dominicans. And so I'll be learning with 2 provinces, so to speak.
So what are the key aspects of the Dominican order as differentiates them from other orders or diocesan priesthood?
So the Dominican order in particular has a strong history of being very kind of academic. So they were founded as a mendicant order, which means
mendicant mean?
Mendicant means like they pretty much begged for their livelihood. They went around and they begged to make ends meet. They were mostly established with...
When I call the homeless guy a mendicant,
you could
it's
call,
not a diminutive term.
No, you could call the homeless a mendicant in some ways.
Yeah, it's a term that gives him vitality and it affirms
respect and dignity.
Yeah.
And at the time, they were like... The Franciscans and the Dominicans were very like edgy, so to speak, in the sense that at the time you had like
1200s, right?
Yeah, like 1200s. You had like secular priests and you had monks. And the Dominicans and the Franciscans come in and they're kind of both.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the world. They're preaching the gospel. They were mostly founded to root out the Albigensian heresy.
Okay, let's digress. What is the
Let's
what
digress,
is the
dude. Yeah, let's break all this
what is
down,
the
man,
Albigensian
because-
heresy?
Salvatore probably has a better grasp on this one, but my understanding is that it is a Gnostic heresy.
What's a Gnostic heresy?
Gnostic heresy, pretty much in very simple terms, means that they weren't too fond of, like, they believed that there was a good God and a bad God.
The world is divided between the material and the spiritual, and
Exactly.
secret knowledge leads you to emancipation through purely spiritual means. It's a complete rejection of
of the physical.
the goodness of the
Yeah.
material world.
Exactly.
And so the Albigensians stem from the Gnostics.
Yes.
Um,
And they were very problematic at the time. Allegedly, they would have like these confessions where you'd only get like confessed once, and that like someone would kill you afterwards. Like they would
Like if
smother
you
like,
didn't die, you're getting smothered.
Yeah, like they
Like,
would
sorry.
like you had one confession in your life, and then
Yeah.
they
Like
killed
they
you.
didn't believe in multiple confessions. It's
It's
one.
just like you get one confession.
So
and then
so
they
if
just
you
kill
if
you.
you do survive the like life-threatening disease that you're on your deathbed with, if you do happen to survive, you fall asleep one day and your confessor their
Has a
job
duty.
has a duty to come in with a little sackcloth pillow and just
end you. Yeah.
hold it over your.
I understand why that was
So you
labeled
could
as a
under- yeah,
heresy.
so you
Right.
could understand why this could
Yeah.
become, not helpful towards a society.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why the
Generally.
Franciscans, the Dominicans came along.
Right.
They also went on to hold multiple positions at the University of Paris, so they became very, within the first 60 years of the founding of the Dominican Order, you have St. Thomas Aquinas, who is,
As opposed to the Franciscans, right?
well, they have Bonaventure, so I'll give them that.
But okay, the Dominicans have
But,
this
yeah, but they have
intellectual
a
sort
kind of a
bent,
more-
whereas the Franciscans are more of like a poverty
Services there.
sort
Yeah,
of thing.
their emphasis is a little more, on service. And, I mean, the Dominicans are called the Order of Preachers, so theirs is definitely about, going out, preaching the word. That's why they're like this monk hybrid priest thing, because, I mean, you can be a lay brother, so to speak. There's levels
You don't
to
have
it,
to be a
whatever.
priest.
You don't have to be a priest per se. But the idea is that you're going out and you're preaching the gospel to everybody. Like, you're getting out of your monastery, you're getting out of the parish, and you're just walking and you're just preaching. Like, this is the good news. We are revitalizing that. We are waking up maybe a oversaturated Christian population who needs to hear the gospel again, who needs it to be important to their life again, who needs it to just come in and work it out, what that is. And that's why I guess I say they're a little more intellectual, but only because of their preaching.
By process of their vocation,
Right,
to
exactly.
preach, they need that intellectual sort of
Exactly.
formation.
And
Okay.
I think it's important to realize that preaching back then was, it's the only thing that the common people have access to, right? As in terms of education and stuff like that. It's most, not to get into the whole class issue thing, but it's preaching even to this day, I think, is still the only opportunity to really get basic, truths about scripture, truths about the faith in a way that is appealing rhetorically, right? Like that was the big thing. You know, you're learning the Roman arts.
Well, because
of,
this is not
speech.
this is pre-printing press, right?
Yeah,
and this is
right.
not a
Still
culture that
oral
has
culture,
like wide access to literacy, and so the only avenue for the gospel in some way is the preaching.
Yeah.
And of course that brings a lot of benefits because it's always within a liturgical context that you're receiving this catechesis, but it's also a necessity sort of thing where it's like, oh yeah, let's be an order of preachers because hey, everybody's getting preached to. So where does that translate today, right? Where obviously the whole dynamic has changed. In regard to preaching is no longer the main form, and maybe it should be, and maybe it is in a lot of ways, but preaching is one of many sort of ways that the gospel is received. Is there this effort within the Dominicans to revitalize preaching, or is it their sort of understanding of the role that preaching plays nowadays and trying to excel within it?
Yeah, I guess it's in two sort of ways. The first one being like you see a lot more pushes in the Dominican order to like have podcasts, to have more open conversations. Like the Thomistic Institute in Washington, D.C., they do a lot of like conferences. They're getting out into the intellectual circles. And so on like a systemic level, they're fighting like the heretical or negative ideas of today's society. They're going out, they're engaging in the top conversations in like bioethics, they're going into theology, they're going into politics. Like the entire like realm of theology is being dove into, so to speak, on like that systemic level, right? So they're taking it to academia because academia is where a lot of these ideas start and get spread and things. So there's like you'll see a lot of Dominicans in academic settings. The other part is like having good preaching in your parish. Like we all know, preaching in parishes is not always, ideal or great. Homilies
up to snuff.
Yeah, sometimes homilies can be just whatever someone thought of that day or something, And so I think there needs to be a reality of like well-taught preaching. Like saying a lot of things doesn't mean you're a good preacher.
AKA, in the future, I'm just gonna become your like ghostwriter for all of your.
Honestly,
let's go there. Let's go there though, because the liturgy has this element where it's like the readings are so ordered in a way to where they relate to each other and they're trying to impart something to you. Right. And the role of a preacher is to sort of facilitate an understanding of that integration, right? Yeah. And that often doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like either you just focus on the gospel, or worse than that, you don't even attend to the readings at all, and it's sort of more of like as a parish priest, you have some house cleaning to do, so you use the pulpit to do that, right? Yeah. And so it's like, but the proper role of preaching is facilitating this integration between first and on Sundays, first, second, third reading, and how they relate to each other. That's what you're meant to do. Like any preaching that's disconnected from the text of what you've been presented is in some way not living up to the thing that it's supposed to be, right?
No, I agree. Yeah, because I think like as good as like more, I guess, what we'd consider like a traditional like blunt kind of catechesis or programmy administrative things or other like side tangents that don't relate to the readings.
Wear nice clothes when you come to mass.
Yeah, things like that.
And get here on time, and I'm gonna talk about it for 30 minutes.
Yeah, things like that don't necessarily need to come from the homily. They should be like, you should hopefully have built up a good parish life where there's another time and place within the life of your parish that you can address these things.
Right.
Like the only time that your entire congregation, or at least chunks of it, are in one place that should not just be mass.
Right.
Like I feel like that's somewhat of a difficulty or a failure of a parish in some ways, to be like, if the only time you have to address everybody about all of these various things is in your like 5 to 10 minute homily.
That's generous.
Yeah, like
20.
Yeah. So it's like,
let's get to 30, especially if he's talking about the DSF. The Diocesan Services Fund.
Listen, the Cardinal must love us because every year he asks us for more money, And listen, he's asked us for $1 million this year, and I know we can do it if everybody just gives their part. And screw the Beatitudes.
right.
You know, that's what we were given the liturgy today. But no, I'm going to ask you for $1 million. Sorry.
Yeah, they're just
Something's wrong there,
teleology.
right?
Yeah,
Something's
like
wrong
there's
there.
a certain teleology that your homily has, right? And teleology is like, what's the purpose and the end of the thing I'm doing today? It's like, sure, have your announcements at the end of Mass, and, you know, it's fine.
Should be at the end of Mass.
But once again, I guess I'm speaking like it helps your homilies if you have a good parish in which you can address these other things. But this is kind of a side tangent.
No, but no, I think like it's like because we're getting down to like the roots of like it's like you're not just becoming a priest, you're becoming a Dominican, and like every order was created for a reason and to reform something, to bring something to the foreground in the life of the church. And like the Dominican is the preaching friar, it's the teaching friar devoted to study, to truth, to prayer, obviously in the context of prayer and community. But like why are the Dominicans still around today? You know, it's like there is a kind of albigency, like Gnostic kind of energy, and a lot of even Catholicism sometimes. Like we have, because of our kind of our rejection of the sexual revolution in such a strong way, we tend to hate the body sometimes, or you know, we hate the body because of our inclination into the sexual revolution. But like, yeah, like preaching specifically to that culture, like, is part of the reason why you're there, you know, like.
Yeah. Because the same things happen within the church. Like, I mean, I love looking at the early church because you see a lot of the similar problems, but a lot of the similar solutions in our modern day. But yeah, they're fighting a heresy every 10 years, and it's within the church. Like, when you think about it, it's like these are Christian heresies. They're not like some outside pagan group. Like, this is in-house stuff. Like, the councils are happening to resolve an in-house issue. Like, the Arians see themselves as Christians to a degree, right? Or like, you know, the various heresies. So it's like these things haven't gone away, right? And so also being a good pastor in your preaching is like, not just a pastor, but as just a preacher in general, is like, how do I keep you on the path towards God and away from error? That means you have to be honest, like.
And that brings in the intellectual character of the Dominicans, right, too, right? Because like, in order to be equipped to do that very function involves this intellectual rigor. Because like, okay, the arguments in the modern culture, not that any of them are intellectually viable, but they take on the language and the character of something that pretends to be intellectual. And so in order to even do that sort of preaching, which is again on like a level that's not academic, it's on a level that's pastoral,
Right.
But you have to be equipped with this intellectual capacity to recognize and preach against the issues as they present themselves. And so it's not like you see a lot of Dominicans in academia, etc. But like the root of preaching is like something pastoral, except it has to be imbued with this character of like, even just like to have the facility of dealing with the issues that you purport to like go against.
Could you speak on like because oftentimes there's a problem in preaching that we kind of identify. Like it's not just a function, right? Like it's not just a function of parish life. It's not just a function of like utility. Like we just need to get these things done, so I'm going to use this opportunity because everybody's here to get a point across. But also like, and I may be adding this, but like, it's also not just an opportunity for mere like moralizing. Like it's not an opportunity to just be like, here, Jesus. Like there obviously is a moral sense to the scripture,
right?
But like, it's not just an opportunity to loosely connect this scripture reading into
moral things that are so tinged with the modern sort of thing.
Yeah. With our
becomes very Kantian.
Because you lose because you're playing by the terms of the moral landscape set up by modern society when you try to pigeonhole the scriptures into this moral thing that's supposed to be responding. No matter how like viable it seems, it's like, but we just don't have to play that same game.
Right.
because
think
the
that's-
moral sense of the scriptures is one sense.
Yeah.
And we lose whenever
But
we pigeonhole the scriptures into that.
like is that sense really? Can we even really call that? Like moralizing is a lot different than morals. The moral sense.
Sure.
You know what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Like when I
That too.
Like I kind of align with Bishop Barron when he talks about like the moral sense of Scripture is kind of what, like, not to toot Jordan Peterson's horn too much because I think he still lacks a lot, but and not to say that he isn't a brilliant person, but it's like,
Oh yeah, thank you.
oh yeah.
But
But
horrible,
it's like
horrible.
no, but that
impression. Sorry.
that moral sense though is something deep. Like you listen to his scripture series and you're like, you know, we're looking at this from an archetypical perspective, which isn't necessarily typological, but it's like it's not about just archetypes and images and stuff like that. It's about like how God is teaching us how to conduct our lives through this story, you know, and like how to deal with our misery, how to, like, that's a lot different. Like that moral sense is a lot deeper than just don't do this. It's your kind of duty based.
No, it's
you know,
it's when in that education you're learning to speak to the hearts of people in ways that aren't like beating a dead horse in some way, like you were saying, like the moralizing. It's relationship, right? It's learning the people you're even talking to. Like I've noticed a lot in like conversations with like non-Catholics in particular, right? Like in the evangelization part of preaching, is like the hang-up's rarely with the intellectual things they can't hop over. Like there has to be this point where they want to listen to those to even go down that path. Like part of that preaching has to like reach into the heart of that person, that in a true listening kind of way. Like you present the truth in such a way that it becomes efficacious. And you see this a lot in like St. Paul when he's like, oh, that hidden God you guys worship, it's actually Jesus. Like, let me go off on this tangent. Right. It's like there are creative ways that preaching was done even by the apostles that actually like is efficacious. Like he knew his approach wasn't working. Because prior to that, he's like preaching all day and everyone's like, okay, this guy's just another crazy guy. And so it's like,
One of the many in Athens.
yeah, exactly. One of the many Athens philosophers walking around spouting off something. But he does it in a
Talking
way
about
that reaches
atoms
them.
or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
weirdly, like, you know.
guys, owls are the way that they
Anachronistic,
are just
yeah.
because
Yeah.
Just
so
because.
they have magic powers.
So he had to add this
Like-
character of like teaching to the heart. where-
You have to hear
Yeah.
somebody. You have to, like, it's like one of the, something that like a psychologist once said was like, you have so many people in the world struggling to be heard. And when you have that kind of society where everybody is just struggling to be heard, nobody listens, you know, like nobody, because everybody's always trying to get like
And so
see me,
the character of messages in a society like that becomes something that's like self-affirming and grasping for attention, right? And so then with the preaching, when you imbue it with this thing that is efficacious and speaks to the heart, that is, in a society like that, I think a society like that is actually primed for reception of something that speaks to their heart in a way that's not like, pay attention to me, but no, like, pay attention to me because this will change you in some way. I think that nobody hears those messages anymore in a society where everybody is grasping for attention. And so true preaching abandons that sort of character of dialogue, which is like, you could even say like reactionary or whatever it is, and actually like has a genuine like character of like reform of the heart and speaking to the heart to it. I think people are primed to listen to that in a society where everything else is not that.
I think also like in the intellectualization, or like how intelligent the Dominican order is and its intellectualism, it's important to not just like leave it in there, in the sense that we can leave it in like vague philosophical like up here concepts that are helpful, but sometimes they're not helpful, in the sense that like we're not engaging something specific sometimes. And that's what I sometimes mean by like more on like one-on-one evangelization, like talking to one person in particular, I've noticed in conversations, it's like they become very uncomfortable when you ask them like, what do you believe?
You did that to us last.
Right, right. And it's the same thing we do as like Catholics, especially like people who come to the faith through like a strong intellectual like background. Like, yeah, I believe these ideas. I can do this and that.
Abstraction is a safe space.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, okay, what about you?
Yeah.
Can you connect that to the concreteness of your experience?
Yeah. So it's like it's important that God doesn't just become like a personal bubble per se, but that it becomes a personal relationship, because then it becomes very real for you. Yeah. But in that same way, it becomes very real for someone who's like not Catholic or like not Christian or whatever, and it's just they're looking for something too. But even they're like they're either attacking you on something, or they're saying, well, I'm just playing devil's advocate, you know, like, what do you say against the problem of evil or something? You know, they're asking you to throw out some like vague. And it's like, no, what's your hang up with God? Yeah. And the whole conversation flips.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it just flips. Like, you're like, because now you're addressing them.
Yeah.
Like, you're having a conversation with them.
So, okay, here's my question to you then, I guess. Because I understand the value of what you're saying.
Yeah.
And, like, so would you place that intimate relationship that you need to have with the person you're communicating with under the heading of preaching? Because like preaching in my mind, right, I'm thinking of the pulpit.
Yeah.
I'm
Less
not
one-on-one, more.
Yeah, more to a community, which can still have very much an intimate character.
Yeah.
But would you place that sort of thing you're talking about under the heading of the preaching that's called to the Dominicans, and how would you relate it to, say, the one-on-one conversation is not a feasible reality when it comes to like being in the pulpit?
Yeah.
How do you facilitate that, something similar to that degree of intimacy with, say,
like 500
a
people?
Congregation?
Yeah.
How do you do that? And also, does that one-on-one thing count as preaching in some way?
Yeah. I think I'd say like going to the scriptures, like thinking of the good shepherd and the shepherd that the pastor is supposed to be, like the sheep know my voice and I know them. Like there's this intimacy between the sheep and the shepherd. And so I think a good, pastor, as he's transitioning to a parish, will definitely, or like a group of people, like should get to know some of those people. Because even within the conversations of Jesus, right, he's doing a broad teaching, but within his teaching, so many conversations happen, right? He's talking to the Pharisees, and people are just around, right? It's the Pharisees, it's the Sadducees, it's the rich man, it's the poor man, it's the prodigal son, like using parables. But the parables usually come out of personal interactions or like one-on-one interactions or questions, and it creates like this dialogue, right? So I'd say like you could grab a general sense of your parish and what it needs and preach and try to cater in that way, right? Like, for example, if you have like a super traditional parish that you go to, like there are just certain problems you just don't see in your congregation as heavily as others, based on your counseling, based on like general things, your conversation, your intimacy with your various parishioners. So like you can definitely avoid talking about certain things. Like I'm not going to go talk to a bunch of 5-year-olds about, celibacy or pornography addictions,
They just can't do it anymore.
Well, it's like, although maybe, maybe that is a problem for a few or some, like, it just doesn't seem, yeah, it just seems
Larry
like,
Flint,
it just seems like not super incredibly, or like if you're in a really traditional parish where everybody's like, you don't really see anyone dressed and modestly ever there or whatever, like,
they're all
you
punctual.
just don't see it. Yeah, everyone's punctual and like
it's almost autistically punctual,
Or on the reverse end, if you're in a Hispanic parish or something like that, it's like, are you really going to preach about like arriving on time? Because it's just kind of understood. It's one of these like, it's a cultural understanding that like
it has the force of culture behind it. Like some other things don't.
Yeah, like what is punctuality really when there's kind of this like the way of life is just so different.
Well, and that's what I mean of like when you're preaching more broadly, like you get to know your parish.
Yeah,
like you get to know the people in your parish, and it's like. I guess when you're preaching generally,
about like one
right?
way to develop that sort of intimacy.
Yeah, and like from the pulpit, right, while still connecting it to the gospel, maybe in your preparation for your homily or for your preaching, it's like, I'm going to take what I know about my parish, and then what's actually, happening in the context of these readings and the gospel, and, pray about it, bring it to the Lord, and to the best of my ability, discern something that I think is actually efficacious to the people I'm talking to, right? Not just like, oh, I have this tangent about this thing, I think, or something like that, right? Which, I mean, we all have tendencies towards, but it's about, like, the homily's not about you. It's about, like, what does your flock need to hear?
Yeah. All right. Beautiful.
After this tangent.
We're going to move into We'd Like Your Story.
Yeah.
First, David, can you grab my wallet out of the side pocket of my backpack? There's a couple $1 bills in there. Can you go to the vending machine and get me a water, please? It's on the other side.
You can have mine if you want.
It's fine. He can go get me one.
You can go get it. David and his love.
Is this all just like a...
Jamie has to do something. Yeah. Take those ones.
This is all a dominating.
There's a water. Just go to the vending machine and give me water, please. I love you, David. Thank you so much. I love you.
That is a man of God.
Okay,
he's the real man of God
That's
behind the
Francis
scenes.
right
He
there.
does
That
his
is
work
Saint
behind the
Francis.
scenes. We're using his camera, his cord, his mic. And he doesn't even need to be on camera like us two narcissistic.
Oh yeah, dude.
jerks.
If I wasn't on camera, I would leave.
There will be.
No, I mean-
There will,
Frankly, I
get bored.
I just get bored. And
I don't know how he sits
Right,
here
yeah.
and deals with
Exactly.
us. There will be an episode of when these two gentlemen are going to the Holy Land.
Yeah.
Say a prayer for them because
Amen.
of the contentious situation over there.
Please don't. Please.
When
pray
they're over
that I
there,
don't get hit by a
David,
rocket.
his voice cracked. David and I are going to sit down and have ourselves a nice little
Nice
That'll be
conversation.
and you'll get to know the man behind the scenes, our Jamie. But what we'd like to know from you then is your story.
Yeah.
Wherever you'd like to start it, because I don't know it. Sal definitely knows, but
Well, we can let's guide you because it's like
Sure.
telling a story. Is
you, I'm saying
yeah.
you know better to guide
Yeah.
than I do.
Yeah.
So take the reins
All right, I'll take that.
and whip him a little bit.
leave-
Whip him a
leave
little
those-
bit.
leave- careful with
I
those
mean,
reins.
I'll be careful.
Yeah.
I'll be careful with the reins. But like, okay, so you
So many
are born
jokes.
in the world. You are alive. You awaken from this deep slumber of embryonic existence.
Yep.
Okay.
Where you were a person.
Where you were a person, fetus
10
just means
pound,
offspring.
11 ounce
That's okay.
person.
You were 10 pounds, 11 pounds.
He's 10 pounds of 11.
Yeah.
Full head of hair.
Big old boy.
You're a beast,
The
son.
beginning of my
You're a
vocation.
beast,
The beginning
son.
of my vocation.
Do you know what the problem is?
Huh.
I was 9 pounds 11 ounces, so like still a big boy,
Yeah.
but smaller.
I think
yet
I was, like,
he's the
7
skinny.
something.
He's the skinny
Well,
one.
Joseph
who
was 10
before this
pounds.
who before this episode is like, oh, I look fat. It's like
You don't look like someone who was born 10 pounds, 11 ounces, all right?
exactly.
You've made some progress.
Let's be
okay?
clear here. Okay, so you awake from your
That's why he can
embryonic
grow
stasis.
facial hair, because he was a beast when he was born. And
Oh,
he's
yeah,
got
Had
it
a
in
full
his-
head of hair, too.
Yeah.
He always had
beautiful.
hair.
Was not a bold baby.
You should.
Oh,
yeah.
David, thank you.
Oh, what a
you
glorious
child of
man.
God.
This is. We're not going to tell you what brand of water this is because Coca-Cola. If you are
Stop it.
Stop listening,
Thank
please.
you, David.
Please give us.
I love you.
Please give us
You're a
money.
good man.
Yes. Okay. So you
Born
awake-
as-
you awaken from embryonic stasis.
Yes.
Okay.
West Virginia.
In West Virginia. West Virginia.
Mountain Mama.
Like that. All right.
Take
okay.
me home.
You are born into a family.
Mhm.
Okay. So I believe that our stories begin with our family, obviously. So please give us a little bit about the family life and the first kind of moments of consciousness that you experience. Wherever you want to go with that.
Well, the first moment of consciousness I experienced was jumping off the 10th stair in Michigan and cracking my head open. So if you want earliest memory, that's...
Now here's what.
That's it.
Here's what
But
we're
how?
doing.
But okay. So this is the story specifically as it regards
Your relationship with
development
Yeah.
into a vocation, which is really what all of our stories are.
Do you remember your first sin?
Oh, that's good.
I do.
Interesting. Interesting. No,
I could
don't-
share, but
It seems
I
like-
don't-
it seems like
no,
you
it's
wanna-
all-
it's all good.
It's
like
about
you
him.
wanna
I could
share.
share, but it's about him. It's fine.
I don't think I remember my first sin. No, not particularly.
Okay.
Augustine did.
Augustine.
Yeah, I'm
did,
trying to make that comparison broadly.
I actually have-
We're doing the confessions thing.
I actually
Confessions
have
thing
like
going
not
in, I'm sorry.
when like memories will come back and resurface.
Yeah,
here
your
and
long-term
there,
memory
but
is
like
horrible.
my long-term memory is actually really horrible.
Is it a lot of repression? What's going on there?
I don't think there was like enough eventful things, I guess.
We-
initially, like,
Yeah.
okay, I can remember like family dinners are always there and very impactful, and I remember that from the early stages of life because it's like when someone talks about an experience, like I'll just start like clicking and remembering so many things. I went to someone's graduation party recently, and we were talking about like my freshman sophomore year. I was like, I forgot all about that. Like, but it all comes back.
Maybe you want
it comes back. Well, it's like I don't think it's not like an active
yeah.
repression.
No,
Just like okay, I'm right now, and I'm moving.
You're gonna be a great person for hearing confessions.
Yeah, exactly. I'll never remember anything anyone says.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be nice and awful.
Can you do confessions over the phone?
No, I cannot do confessions.
That's
I can listen to your problems over the phone,
yeah.
but I won't be able to.
No, that's not what I need. I need the assurance of
Absolution.
grace,
No.
brother.
I need to cure my.
And I'd like to not have the inconvenience of having to go and be in front of a person who's in persona Christi. I'd like to just have it
for
be
your
over
growth.
the phone.
It's for your growth to make the drive.
Whatever.
But
Fine.
Okay,
yeah,
so, yeah.
I'd say like Michigan. I don't remember too much. Indiana, I remember like riding bikes, learning how to ride a bike, so that was pretty cool.
How old were you when you learned how to ride a bike?
Probably like 5 or 6.
How do you feel
It's
that?
a solid age.
How do you feel
It's
that
a solid age.
took you closer to the Lord?
There was a nice guy who
You
actually
jerk.
took off in our neighborhood who took off my training wheels. So I was like, that's really cool. Like, it's
Is
really
that a
nice to have
code word
random
for,
people.
like, getting diddled or?
No,
You took
just
off your
genuinely
tra-
there
you
was
took
like
off your
there
training
was
wheels?
no, there was just a
Wrong
nice
sibling.
there was just a nice neighbor.
We're gonna
who-
keep it clean.
to
I won't
help
talk
me.
about getting
Yeah.
diddled anymore.
Yes.
Okay, there's a nice man who took off your training wheels. It's a core.
And
memory
taught me,
for you.
yeah, exactly. Taught me how to ride a bike. I do have early memories of falling asleep in like almost every Easter vigil until I was like probably like 10.
That's only human.
Yeah. So the cathedral in Indiana was beautiful when we lived there. Gorgeous.
Do you feel like you take beauty for granted now because you were exposed to it, like so young?
It's a good question.
In some ways, I think I'd notice it more when we like started traveling, because I think my parents growing up were very intentional about like taking us to nice masses, nice liturgies. Like this was a point in my parents' life where they were definitely like coming back hardcore into the church. But they were also very good about letting us experience a lot of like different aspects of the church, which I was very grateful for. Like
What do you mean? What
different
aspects?
lay movements. So like Communion and Liberation, CL, like an Italian lay movement that's come up. Opus Dei we were involved in. We even did like some Focolare for a bit, but like mostly Opus Dei, CL kind of stuff. But like our parents had this like philosophy of like
we were not in enough to receive the little spike garters.
oh gosh, that the Da Vinci Code tells us. Yeah. No, we were not.
I wasn't gonna say anything. So I just said
when you
something.
turn 13,
You come down.
when you turn 13, then they give it to you. That's
But yeah, we were in different like
the rigid gender roles type stuff.
Yeah, that's more just to stop. Like, don't catch any scandals. Basically, it's
no, it's
smart.
very
fine.
it's very
it's efficient.
very-
It's efficient.
yeah, it's
Maybe
nice.
it's not smart, but
efficient.
it's efficient.
Yeah.
I think we learned different things from both kind of movements in a lot of different
Beautiful.
ways that were very
Yeah.
helpful. But yeah, I mean, for me, I guess the big like significant spiritual consciousness kind of like first intentional moment, other than just kind of being culturally in the faith, being taught well, like understanding through the practice of my parents and siblings, was when we moved here when I was 8, and I'd received my first communion the year before, but I started altar serving with my older brother at the chapel, and like this brought me to have like an early encounter with the Eucharist for the first time, and I was very grateful because I was like 8 and I was altar serving with like college age dudes who were teaching me how to altar serve, and their like reverence and respect for the Eucharist at a very young age taught me like this is important. Like I don't fully understand what it is, but like I see all these men that I look up to a lot like kneel whenever they cross, the tabernacle area, bow to the altar, like, and I get to be a part of that. So I'm gonna do the same thing. When you're little, you imitate, right? And if you have good things to imitate, there's nothing wrong with that. So I grew up in that kind of environment, and the liturgy really has been like the closest thing for me, and like altar serving was really important for me. When I turned like 15, I think that's when I got like a real spiritual kind of like consciousness, more of like that's also when my Pelagianism kind of caught up.
What's Pelagianism?
Pelagianism is the belief that kind of by your own will or kind of merit you can work hard enough for your salvation, so to speak, right? So in theory, I was like, no, I don't do that. But in practice, I was getting to a point in my life where I was. So
what's like a concrete example of like something you would do, or like a mentality you'd have about like prayer or your actions or something like that?
So I think at this point in my life, like at like 15-ish, I was probably watching a lot of YouTube videos on like, and this comes from my own like, how do I be a man, you know, in this world, right? Like, you know, we all have those stages of like, how do I grow up, be a man, blah, blah. And so you fall into like...
There's a YouTube video.
Yeah, like random YouTube videos about like, hey, what makes a man, you know, like, and they're generic, kind of superficial things, like, you know, shaking hands
used American
and whatever.
Psycho, you know.
Okay, definitely not that. But like, there's various YouTube channels that are like whatever, and I was like, yeah, be disciplined, be fit, you know, like those men talk up kind of stuff that we kind of still have
This
today.
was pre-JBP, you were on this YouTube stuff?
JBP.
Jordan B. Peterson.
Oh yeah, way before Jordan Peterson. Yeah, I was like on this like
These were like the YouTube channels that would like market, like it was all set up around marketing products.
Yeah,
like,
so it'd be like grooming, fitness, things like that, like how to talk
Anything
to
you could
women, you
Whatever
know,
beautiful
like,
beard oil you have going on, yeah.
I didn't have this at 15, but
yeah, I did.
Jeez. But it was kind of like,
So you're seeking on YouTube.
yeah, I was like,
Things that
I think it came out
could
definitely out of like an
form a specific
insecurity.
way.
Like I'm like, I was homeschooled, so I'm kind of like, I'm looking at this outward society that I'm dipping my toes into, and I'm like, where do I, like, what do they like, and how do I fit in, kind of thing, like. And I actually remember this, like, this also like a little bit of like body insecurity kind of developed around like 15, where I was like, I was not very overweight at all, like maybe like 5-10 pounds was like growing weight, but my doctor was like, oh, your BMI is like a little bit more than
Now let me touch you.
the normal, like, no, my mother, no, my doctor's
Also,
my
mandatory
pediatrician-
prostate exam.
our
you
doctor-
Our
fatty.
pediatrician was awesome.
Really?
Yeah.
Catholic, like great,
That's beautiful.
great guy, honestly. Like would recommend articles about like things to read up on, like intellectual, like well read, not only in his field but in like Catholicism as well. Like
He's like holding.
I wish I could keep
testicles
going.
and discussing
Telling you about
mysteries of
Aquinas.
no, it honestly makes it like less awkward. You know? Like you're doing your physical checkup and you're just having conversations.
Yeah, my doctor was
Yeah.
just silent and he looked me in the ass, you know, and it made it very uncomfortable.
Gosh, yeah. See, that's worse.
Yeah.
He's like, "Do you want your mother to leave the room?" I was like, "Yes, please," but also I don't want to be
Yeah.
alone in a room with you, you
Yes.
creep.
One of the
weird
one of-
eye contact.
One of the
Yeah.
few times.
Regardless of doctors.
One of the few times that an Italian man was allowed to, you know, go to a non-Jewish doctor, basically.
It's not New York anymore.
Exactly.
But pretty much like, yeah, so there's like these things about my like my body weight index, and I was like, okay. And so I started throwing myself into like running and like trying to be like fitness. So there's like this mixed insecurity of like trying to fit into this world but also be like a man. So I'm like, what are these outward signs? And so I was like, in every aspect of my life I'm going to be super disciplined. And so I started going to like daily mass. So I was like, that's a thing.
This ties into the Pelagianism. The
Okay,
Yeah,
so
this is where it
proving
kind of
and
like starts like,
meriting on your own.
I
sort of
want to
discipline.
be a man, and what does that look like aesthetically? Like, you know, I look up to Catholic men too, right? Like, I'm not just online, like whatever, like screwing through like various YouTube videos and being
Matt
like,
Walsh,
oh,
the
yeah.
paragon of masculinity.
Yeah, and
Or,
it's just-
no, I mean Matt Fradd, both of them.
Right.
Like, this is way
Paragons of
before them, you
masculinity.
know,
But
This is
so-
before
so-
all that.
So, like, at this point, the going to mass and like the prayer and stuff like that is being couched within like the larger narrative of like being a man.
Yeah, like this is a discipline thing. I go to daily mass, and I think there was also a genuine aspect with it. Like, I don't think it's all purely Pelagian or whatever. Like, I enjoyed the liturgy, and I had from a young age. Like, I was taught a
But there's a
respect for it.
maturity that's.
And there's a maturity that has to happen in that process. And it was like, the grace of God still brought me there every day, right? And so it's like, the liturgy was beautiful for me, and I started going every day. And I was going on like a college campus at like 15 or 16, and, you know, altar serving and helping out. And at the time, you know, I always picked the prettiest girl to like come and read, and be like, I guess I have to go and ask her to read.
Right, I guess so.
It's fine.
Oh, no.
I don't know. I guess I'll do it. It's
Gotta
fine.
go to mass today.
Yeah, gotta go to mass today.
See all the hot college
Yeah,
students.
exactly. Oh no.
But I'm
Don't
5,
tell them
7
I'm
years old.
16.
Exactly. But it was like it was like small and
Sure,
flirtatious
yeah,
here.
yeah.
You know, it's, you know.
You've
still
sworn them
teenagers are
off. We can speak
teenagers.
freely
Yeah,
about this.
exactly.
We can
Teenagers
speak
are
freely about this.
teenagers.
Right.
Yeah.
So you are
Some great people
So
there, right?
okay, so this
Beautiful
so
people
so
there.
you're describing this like process of the discipline. So like mass at this point is like your experience of this. Sorry, let me just okay.
You're good. No, I'm just checking.
Okay.
Time.
Your experience of going to mass is more of like this is part of a framework in like in what a disciplined man. So like, are you responding to a perceived lack of that masculinity? Is it deeper than that? And also like, where does that come from?
Yeah, I don't like. I literally think it was like that kind of comment, and there's a desire to like fit in a little bit. Like, I'm not sure I really knew. Like, I could not articulate it to you at that time, and I'm not really sure I could completely articulate it now. Like, the catalyst for those things didn't like rupture until like college, when I got into like an actual romantic relationships where it's like all these things just stare you back in the face. Everything you've built up is all of a sudden like being questioned. You're like, actually I have no idea.
Right.
So like, I think it's built underneath that insecurity, like slowly building that up. I got into weightlifting, got really good at it. I was in there like, 3 days a week, 2 hours.
Looking jacked.
Yeah, getting swole. But I had to, I think that fell into the Pelagianism. But once I got into college, like freshman, sophomore year, I just got thrown into even more things. Like, discipline and hard work are valuable things, and that's what I'm going to do. And so it just goes into like...
Did it almost become like a coping mechanism for...
Yeah, it was like I couldn't...
Some of these deeper spiritual...
Yeah, like I couldn't
issues.
sit in silence.
Right.
Like, my prayer life had not a lick of silence.
It's just do.
When my little 5 minutes of prayer after Mass were just me talking, like... That.
Saying the things you feel like
yeah,
you
exactly.
need to
Like,
say.
hey, God, today, like, life's a little rough today, but, like, help me out with my schoolwork or whatever, blah, blah. Like, help me get through the... Not even really rarely a Thanksgiving even. So, like, my prayer wasn't involved around silence or Thanksgiving, which are very important to relationship with God. And so, for me...
When did you start to realize, I guess, kind of the chinks in the structure you had set up around, okay, the underscoring Pelagian instinct of I need to like prove or merit this myself through discipline, but also you said there's a lot genuine there, but like, okay, within your prayer life, this to-do list almost, or saying what you need to say, what was the catalyst for recognizing that God was calling you to a deeper and more intimate sort of prayer life?
Relationships, probably. I'd say, like, being in college, like, there's a certain point in which, like, doing all those things also starts hitting this, like, burnout period a little bit. You're like, you start asking your question, why am I doing, like, why am I involved in, like, 4 organizations, going to Mass every day, working out 2 hours every other day, hanging out with friends all the time. Like, my whole day is packed from when I wake up to when I go to sleep, and I don't have a moment of silence. Like, noise fills and keeps me going, and there's just a certain point where like God starts tugging on your heart a little bit, being like, okay.
And does that initial like experience of like tugging feel more like, oh, I'm doing something wrong, or does it feel like I'm like, come closer to me, like, what do you experience?
I think there's like a little bit of like moralism of like, if you like, there's this association of your identity where, and I think a lot of America has this, where it's like, if you're not working, you're not useful kind of thing. And so it's like, I have to prove that I'm intelligent and useful by working hard and doing these things. But then I got into a relationship after like my freshman year, and like that's the first time where you're like, I'm encountering another person. What is this? Like, I've never dated before. Like, what am I doing here? And for that first relationship, I definitely like put on what I perceived as like a good boyfriend. It strikes me now that it's like, that's my relationship with God. Like, what is the image that I want you to see of me? Firstly, in that relationship, and then it's like the parallels between your relationships with people and your relationships with God are very powerful. And I think I just had bad interpersonal relationships in some ways, in some senses. And so when I'm in that first relationship, I'm like, I go back to that, like, what's a man, like, training from my my early teenage years of like, okay, what does a good boyfriend do? What does a good man do? Takes him out, takes care of a girl, is polite, is a gentleman, is all these things. And like you should be those things anyway, but for me it was more about the image of those things.
It was more like living an aesthetic.
Yeah. And I don't think at the time I really realized that. Like I don't think I had the emotional intelligence to realize that. I was like, no, this is what I've been taught. I've been taught gentlemanly skills but like the emotional intimacy that is usually required you.
I'm doing this because like this is a person that's deserving of it. I love this person, etc. Like,
and so like in that relationship, the person remains kind of still like an abstract mystery to you, like an idea. It's like it's more about my performance to you than about any sort of like meaningful communication or connection.
that parallels the current relationship you had with God, right? So like he remains this abstract mystery to you that you owe a duty to in some way, and like that's not the relationship God calls you to.
Right. I don't understand that someone would want to get to know me and like know my heart and understand these things about me. So when those kind of emotional pushes happen, like it's like whoa I like it's like, why are you asking questions I don't even ask myself? Because like I wasn't self-reflective, right? That would require the silence that I didn't have. And so when they're like, this person's trying to love you, and you're like, I don't know the answer to these questions that you're asking me, and that scares the crap out of me, right?
Jeez.
Like I don't know what to do with that. And so it just got to a point like 3 months in where you're like if you're just an anxiety ball all the time, you're like, what if they get to know this real me that I don't even know? Like, what am I showing them? Like, and you become so afraid of like yourself, and
like your inability to allow them to probe you there is a symptom of your inability to allow God into those places.
Exactly. Like I don't want you there. I don't want God there. I don't want anybody there. Like, I don't even want to go there.
Yeah.
Don't touch it. Like, don't touch the wound. Don't touch the emotional side. Like, an exterior, I will act the part of a good boyfriend, and I will be a good person to you, right? And so,
but like because when your whole economy of relationship is based on merit, that's all you have to do. That's all you're called to.
Exactly.
If I act the part of
right,
good
that's all that
boyfriend,
matters.
You don't have the right to ask me for anything else because I'm meriting it through my very actions.
Exactly.
But it's like that's not intimacy.
It's transactional.
So, yeah.
I wish 18-year-old Anthony knew that, but we live
Okay,
right?
so-
but this is part of like
the growth. This
is the journey you have to go through.
So there's this development that has been, I won't say it's completed, but like has been happening within yourself.
Yeah.
Out of that very limiting and there's no room for growth when you're just meriting and proving because it's not a relationship. It's not a relationship. So relationships spurred that initial growth, but what's it been like, I guess, on the practical, but also just the spiritual, in the slow journey out of that transactional into
like what hits okay, so if the relationship is like the catalyst, then like what's the point when you actually become aware? At least like obviously it's not going to be in the same way that you are aware now, but like what's the point in which you become at least initially aware that like I need to.
You kind of have to slowly journey through a lot of my relationships to kind of get there, but I'm not gonna. I'll try to go through the broad kind of spectrum,
sort of thing.
After that, it was more of like the initial question of like because I abruptly ended that relationship because I was just like I didn't understand, like scared, like it was so overwhelming, like I literally like shut down kind of thing, and it just didn't make sense. You're like. You give it time and you think everything's fine and whatever, and you've done zero work on yourself or any self-introspection. And I just kind of went back to my way of life. I felt bad and guilty, and I thought everyone was going to hate me. I thought the whole school was going to hate my guts because I ended a relationship despite not like having done actually anything. Like I didn't do anything horrible per se, other than, but like
keep talking.
I was
I'm
scared.
Gonna check the levels.
Yeah, no, you good. Like I was scared, and so a year happens. I've done zero work on myself. I come into another kind of even shorter relationship that was kind of just like more or less like I need attention-ish kind of thing, and that ended very quickly. And then it was just kind of like that's where my burnout happened. That's where like my sense of self was like, okay, nothing changed.
Like what I'm hearing in all of these things is this distinct parallel between not just interpersonal relationships, but intimate relationships with a woman, right? And the way that your relationship with God is playing out.
That's like how you experience intimacy.
Because they are very close.
Yeah, they are super
maybe,
close.
Maybe an intimate relationship with a woman is the closest place that you can come to understand the dynamics between you and God. Because like, besides like your parents or something like that, but like that is where intimacy exposes itself in your relationship to it in your life.
Yeah.
And so you found that, right? Like the problems that arose in your relationships with women in an intimate way were reflective of more broad, or not even broad, more like deep and like poignant problems that you had with God.
Yeah, and after that relationship, it was kind of like, that's when I fell into probably like a lot of like, I'd still go through the motions of my life, but there was a lot, like there was a greater like, not a strong apathy yet, but like a sense of apathy in which it was like, okay, whatever, like I just live my life. And I created this like false, or narrative rather, of myself of like, I'm just the bad guy who kind of just, breaks some hearts here and there because I can't figure out my own emotions and grow up. And it's like, I don't know what I need to do to get fixed and go through this. And maybe that's just like an excuse of going through. But then like, well, I mean, just living my life, going to school, whatever. I get to encounter like a spiritual director for the first time in my life who actually like finds me.
Which was when did this?
So that was like 2019 fall, like the fall of 2019.
About 4 years ago.
Yeah, about 4 years ago. And this priest like was just celebrating at mass one day. Father Richard had brought him in. There was like a short like reception thing afterwards where you could like talk for a little bit, and I literally had like 5 minutes to stop by this thing before my class started. Like it was like 1:55 at a 2:10 class. Like I was in, and I pretty much had to leave.
Why'd you stop by?
I don't know. Just cause like meet new people. I didn't know Father Richard super well at that point, and this Father David Parker seemed cool, and so I was like, start talking to him. Like less than 5 minute conversation, and he's like, we should talk, we should continue this conversation kind of thing. I forget what he said. Like, he said something that, like, I don't remember what it was, but I just remember it being, like, it's sticking with me. And I was like, no one said something in a long time that's, like, stuck with me. And so we exchanged numbers, and I was like, okay, I guess if I'm that frustrated about how I am, might as well, get at least some spiritual insight, hopefully.
So there was a part of you that was receptive.
Yeah, there's a part of me that was
even
like,
if you didn't know it.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Clearly, in the last couple of years, I have no idea what I'm doing in terms of like navigating myself, and so, like, I'll do this. I'll meet with him and see what's up. And first time we met for like quite a bit of time, like 2 or 3 hours or something. And initially, it's like getting to know one another a little bit because like I don't know who this guy is. Like, you gotta knock down some levels of trust for me here. I don't know you at all, that kind of thing. But then he had me like actually dive into scripture, and it was the first time I think scripture, like the saints and the people in there became like real people for me.
Lectio Divina.
Yeah, exactly. It was like very good. Like for the first time in my life, I was like Lectio Divina, and it was just like, these are real people, and they're like you, and you have human experiences, and that's okay.
So you began to interact with the scriptures in a way that's alive, which is what they are.
But for me, it was always like, oh, Peter's perfect, whatever. Right. Like, let's just gaslight all the stories where he's not.
Well, that's where like academia and like an intellectual bent towards the scriptures can kind of cannibalize the experience of scripture itself. Like Summer, bleep the word, but he's talked about his inability to even do Lectio Divina because his impulse is always to be academic about the scriptures. Where it's like sometimes that's not even, yes, they stand up to. Yeah. If you want to probe them academically, they stand up and they'll blow your mind. But that's not even the way that you're supposed to.
The depth of it is
allow them to touch you. It has to be like something so simple that's what blows your mind, is the simplicity and the real, like the real people, real experiences, and like it's an alive text that like can work on you.
Yeah, and so we first read Peter denying Christ 3 times, and sitting with that, and like he would step out of the room and everything. And and he came back
Big
in.
player move.
Yeah, big. No, honestly, this man is a
He's going to
genius.
grab
This
a
man is a
coffee.
genius. He's. And then afterwards, I sat and I reflected on the time that when Jesus asked Peter if he loved him. And it was the first time, like, the seed of something was getting sown in my heart of, like, this idea that, like, Christ loves me specifically, even if I'm a sinner. Because, and right, going back to that Pelagian mindset
So,
of, like...
tearing down your merit-based.
Right, exactly. Like, for me, I'm like, oh, if I will myself to stay out of, like, big sins and stuff, like, that makes me worthy of heaven in some way, right? It's not the grace of God, it's me.
Love is earned.
Yeah, love is earned, exactly. That's the big theme there, like, love is earned. And so for me, it's just like, you know, he just screwed up pretty big, you know, in front of God. And it's like someone who's, like, very intimate relationship with this person, and he's like, hey, he doesn't, like, yell at him or chastise. He's like, feed my sheep. And, like, that's like his I forgive you.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's like he doesn't, it's not forgiveness, it's like a call to mission, like, you are worthy of my work.
And built within that call itself is implicit forgiveness, because it's like, hey, buddy, yeah, you messed up, and I saw it. I was there getting my ass whooped, and I saw what you did. But go ahead and feed my sheep. Like you're not unworthy. I know exactly what you did, but I have stuff for you to do too. And
that's the format of, like, every prophet's calling is God calls them, they come up for an excuse for why they're unworthy. God removes the obstacle and is like, did I stutter? Right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm too young. Oh, they'll not listen to me. Like, you know, there's always these excuses that we have. But for this particular instance, it was like this seed of, like, love being sown. And my spiritual director was, like, very in tune from the very beginning that, like, silence was a struggle for me. And, like, I met this guy for an hour, right? Yeah. Exactly. But even within our conversations, like, he wouldn't tell me what to say or wouldn't keep up, like, a typical conversation. Like, he would leave intentional, like, chunks of silence to the point where I was uncomfortable, and he sensed that. Like, he would sit there and let me just sit in the uncomfortability. Like, imagine just meeting someone and you're just awkwardly sitting there.
But it doesn't feel like that.
Well, it does. It feels
it's
agonizing
awkward,
at first. Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, it's awkward for you, but that you can sense that they're not doing it because they're being awkward.
No, because exactly, like, they're intentionally being quiet. Like, you're like, you know what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing. Why are you being quiet? And you just start rambling because that's what you do to fill the space, and then you kind of get the idea that it's like, just shut up. And so within my spiritual direction, I was like, okay, I need to learn how to be quiet.
So what was your problem with silence then, as you've come to understand it?
I think,
to
like,
wherever you are now,
I would just sit with it, and it becomes like, oh, what's the point of this inactivity? Negative thoughts kind of happen, right? Like, you know, you're useless. You're not supposed to be sitting down and, like, whatever. Like, go out there and do something. Be useful, right? Like,
so it's like in the false promise of, like, activity will save me.
Yeah.
Comes the added, like, downfall of, like, oh, I'm not actually going to be able to seriously address myself and give myself because I don't have the time to actually know who I am.
Right. Yeah, and that was, like, the beginning of a much longer journey through a lot more other kind of pains, but that kind of begins to sow a lot. And then, like, COVID happens. I was in another relationship right before that, and that similar kind of, like, the seed had been sown, but it hasn't really grown into a fruit. Like, I was still kind of afraid and was battling this inability to, like, let someone love me.
Yeah.
Which is hard, right? You know, they gotta let someone in to, like, love you. And so I'd gotten out of that, and I was like, I am just done with myself. Like, I am so over myself. Like there's just this big sense in which you're like, I'm still doing this, and you want to, like, bang your head against a wall. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go outside every day during COVID, and I'm going to go for a walk. And I suck at silence, so I'm going to read these, like, laudate, like, reflections on the daily readings, because scripture was super helpful. So I'd go out, and I'd find a spot at the Manil, and there's, like, these beautiful white flowers. It was, like, springtime. It was gorgeous, you know, like, for whatever, you know, pandemic, people
Nobody's
are dying,
driving
you know,
cars,
like, no one's
there's
driving
toxic gas
cars.
in there,
Yeah, it's like,
beautiful.
It's sunny. It was, like, springtime right before it got super hot, and I'm just going on these daily walks and just sitting for hours in the day and, like, reading and reflecting and, like, learning to sit in silence and like enjoy nature, be a little bit of a hippie. Like it was honestly great. Like just sit in grass, just do weird things.
You frolicked.
Yeah,
I think they call
frolicked once or twice.
I think they call that grounding in the hippie community.
Yeah, I was becoming a little bit of a hippie, but it was good.
Yeah.
And I was building that silence, and it allowed me to stay out of like kind of more serious sins in my life that I've been like struggling with and stuff. So it was like really important that like that starts to get torn away so that I can hear God's voice even better, right? Like there's not this weight of like a disconnect from God. Like I'm engaging in his word, I'm being quiet, I'm listening to what he says in his word, right? And so I'm learning to do that over the course of like months and months and months and months and months until like the fall semester, kind of get back into the swing of things. I'm a lot more at peace, I'd say. Like my prayer life is getting better, and after like probably like late, probably like 8 months later or something, the big kind of moment, I was like in the chapel and I'm like kneeling before the tabernacle because I was setting up for mass, and there's like no one there because it's COVID, and so like very few people are going to church and stuff. So it was like I was checking the tabernacle, making sure there are enough hosts there. I close the tabernacle, I kneel down, I try to get off my knee, and I hear my name like just somewhere. I kind of look around and I'm like, ain't nobody else here, so I'm losing my mind. I try to get off my knee again, I hear it again, and I hear it a third time, and I'm like, I'm losing my mind. It's whatever. I'm like creating constructs.
Yeah, that's that academic.
Yeah, that's that academic, right? And then I walk in front of the altar and I look up at the crucifix, and I hear like in my heart like, and I love you, and I'm just like, yeah, you're God. That's sarcastic me. It's just like, that's what you do, right? That's what we read about since I was little. I read the Baltimore Catechism, and I hear it again the second time, and I'm just like, okay. That's where you get quiet, because you're like, okay. And you hear it the third time, right? Exactly. And then you hear it the third, like, if you're taking the time to call within my heart my name and then say this, I was expecting like, hey, go be a priest, go set my church on fire. I was expecting like, when I heard the voice of God, I wasn't expecting
just the
I love my name and I love you, right? And so it's like,
that's all he ever has to say, man.
and that third time I broke down like a baby in that church, and like that was a hugely like culminating experience of the silence and of like the lies that I've been telling myself for so long. So it's like, I guess to say like in a vocation, you're first called to holiness, like you're firstly called to a relationship with Christ before he's like, because that's what I want. Like I wanted him to just be like, go like Moses and go out and do these things, right? I want him to call me to go do something. Back to that action, right? Back to that, like, I need to go prove. Like, I know that this peace and the silence is happening. Now you got to tell me what to do instead of me just doing it on my own. And so, but it wasn't. It was just it's like dwell with me. It was like, I love you. Like, sit in that.
Yeah. Was that was hard for you to receive?
Yeah, I mean, that was I think that was like one of the, that was like the first probably like those big moments they talk about in vocations. But it was like, and I don't like just saying those out. It's just like, it comes from such a long time of being with our Lord.
And being also like being prepared to hear it.
Exactly. Like
it's like, do you experience those 3 I love yous in the same way if you didn't read Peter's story?
Right.
Like in that way.
I didn't even make that connection.
And yeah, that's great.
But I mean, like it's one of the opportunities of putting your life in a narrative context is realizing,
seeing things.
Yeah.
Well, and then like also it's kind of falls flat to describe an experience as an experience when, like you were saying, it's the culmination of a long journey of walking with the Lord, where it's like this. When I just say this how it happened, this
sounds like a wow story that you say at a confirmation
but that's not
retreat,
what it is. It's like this is something I was longing and yearning for all my life.
And when he talked to me, and it wasn't what he wanted me. I didn't want to. It was not what I wanted.
Right. So it's that's interesting. So it's like you're hearing the voice of God in this kind of.
But I'm listening for something in particular.
Right. It's like you would be expecting this miraculous story of like, this is the high point. This is the peak. This is the point of conversion. This is the heroes.
Paul thing.
It kind of goes downhill after here.
This is no, right. This is Paul's getting thrown on his ass, right? But it's like you didn't even want to hear "I love you." You wanted to hear like go and tell them.
Exactly.
Like this miraculous experience almost.
It was like I wanted a slightly different miracle.
Yeah.
But yet I was so grateful, like
No,
to
yeah,
hear
of
that.
course,
Like it's
yeah.
what I
'Cause that's what
actually
you
needed to
needed,
hear. And that's kind of how I knew it was from God, because like.
Because he never conforms to your expectations of what he wants to
Not
do.
at all. I was like, well, that's not what.
When it's something that like moves you powerfully, but it's exactly not what
Not
you
what
want to
you wanted,
do.
yeah.
That's
You're
a
like,
great marker
it's a
for,
great
hey,
marker
maybe
for
this
me,
is
yeah.
the Lord.
I've been looking at the wrong place.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's
Okay, so
that's
so
beautiful.
You experience this,
Yep.
and then it's like it moves you
It moves me
for a couple of days.
for a couple days, exactly.
Right. And then
Obviously, it still moves him.
No,
Yeah,
obviously.
but
I mean,
but
like,
it's
this is-
Yeah,
in
like,
the practice.
you
Let's
need
be honest.
experience,
Let's
it's
be
like,
honest.
alright.
I'm
gonna put this somewhere and not talk about it,
Any
'cause people
mystical
gonna think I'm crazy.
experience tends to the immediacy of
Yeah.
it tends to fade, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes this thing that like almost gets like archived in our like core memory sort of thing. But like,
And it takes a while to even tell people about it, because
Yeah.
I'm insane, and it's also
Right.
like a deeply
oh
personal
yeah,
moment.
no, I feel that. a
Yeah,
lot.
you're like,
yeah.
what am I supposed to tell people?
But I think it's also
Supposed to tell people God's
Yeah,
speaking.
exactly.
God Himself is speaking to me.
Yeah.
Which is true, but it's like, how does that sound? I mean,
Exactly.
and I think it's important to like it's like the change that's happening. Like I
So
think, like you
slow.
said, it's right, but it's like it's so helpful to see in a narrative context. Okay, we've driven out these causal chain of events, and then here's the point. Like
Yeah.
here's the right here, bam. But it's like no, it's like that's how change works. Like change.
Also,
is-
that was like 3 years ago.
it change isn't even gradual.
Yeah.
It's like it's just like you wake up one day and you're different, and it's like upon looking back we can kind of set a little our markers, but
reflection allows you this narrative sort of structure, but in the that's not the way
that's
that
not
you
how we
experience it.
Yeah.
No, there's so many ups and downs, and like after that, I'm in another relationship, and then another relationship, and like I still get in those spirals, and the relationships get better. Like I learn to be like, okay, like as my relationship with God is improving, I'm learning to be with people, to seek that intimacy. It's still hard, but I just don't, like every day I'm like, it's gonna be hard, but like you're gonna choose this, like, because love is a choice, and maybe that's not always like maybe my whole attitude wasn't perfect, but it was better than it had been in the past. But yeah, and I mean, I talked to y'all a little bit about this like last time. Like my last relationship, like towards like the end of it, it was just like me feeling like mostly garbage, but like I'm still in this relationship, it's not like I'm not running from this, like
feeling the trial.
yeah, but I'm feeling like worthless a little bit. Like I'm feeling like, am I not enough, God? Because of the ways that I feel like I've failed the other person or something. Now it's like I'm in a relationship with God, but now I don't think I'm earning heaven anymore. It's like this other kind of opposite of like, now I'm just failing you.
Yeah, not that like I have to prove myself to you,
Right.
but you
Can I just stop failing you?
Give me everything,
Yeah.
and still here I am,
Yeah.
and like the things that come with that. Yeah.
And that's when I was like in the chapel, like feeling at a very low point, like looking at my hands and then being like, am I not enough? And then I talked about this, like I look up at the crucifix and I hear that exact same thing back to me again, like, am I not enough? And you're just like,
And it's like it's something that powerful that even I experienced. That's like that's only coming from God. Like
exactly.
That's like something that is so you can't just. That's something that strikes me in my heart, and like those are God's words.
No, and the seeds of like a vocation were always there, and the relationship ends. Go through summer. I go through like a very apathetic summer. Like once again, it's like these beautiful moments happen, and I just kind of, I go back into this like
let's explore
lethargy.
that apathy, right? So like, because that's something that I fall into a lot of times, right? Where it's like, I don't want to call it like depression, right? But this lack,
You probably should.
that's what,
Yeah.
that's what my spiritual director told me.
Yeah.
But this inability to sort of like resonate with the
good or the bad.
The good or the bad, and then it's like this just total like callousness to even the beauty that's happening in front of you. Like God is like calling to me, and I have a relationship with him, and I don't care. This apathy like robs me of any sort of appreciation or emotion that is proper to the things that are happening to me. And it's a phases I slip into that I come out of, but I go like that seems to be this place that I go back to a lot.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned it a couple times, so I want to ask your opinion
Yeah.
on that general apathy. Where does it come from? What kind of role does it play? Is it a symptom of something, or is it a comfort thing? And what do you do even like when you're there?
Yeah, I think initially my my spiritual director kind of talked about it as like, you have this great, like, he's telling me, like, I have a great fear of, like, commitment. Like, he's like, one foot's always in one door, like, through the doorway, the other one's out the other one. So you're not ever willing to walk through that door because, like, you're afraid of either what you're leaving behind or what you're walking into. Like, you don't trust that, you know, like, you're holding on to that past thing and then you're just trying to hold on to this other thing in the future. And you're not living in the present, and you're not doing one or the other. And so you create this kind of like apathy of like, what's the point? Like, you're living in the world of like, I've been a sinner and all these bad things, but maybe at this point in my life, I'm not like doing anything super horrible, right? Like, I'm not committing any major mortal sins this month, you know, like, wow, good for me, right? Exactly. That's what I mean. It's like, it's not a huge achievement, but it kind of, it kind of falls into that Pelagianism once again a little bit of like,
because it's comfortable. That's a comfortable space.
it's a comfortable space of like, but we live just in such, I think we're taught that moralism even in Catholicism of like, I'm not doing something bad, I'm all right. Like, we don't teach a very good positive theology.
This radical sort of
like giving.
Yeah.
Like, we don't actually love very well. We don't actually go out and like expose ourselves, like our hearts to other people in intimate relationships, even in like friendships sometimes, you know, like truly share ourselves well. And that's one thing I liked about like our men's group on campus was like, we, as much as men tease each other and whatever, like we had a night where, in a space where like when someone talks here, we're there for them. Like, this means that there's something on their heart, you know. It wasn't always super serious. Maybe it was something light. Maybe it was something super serious. But it's like, this is a moment we're here for each other, and that helps. And it's like in a group, so it's like it's not just you. It's easier sometimes to share in a group than just one-on-one. But like you're sharing your heart a little bit there. But I guess the apathy is like, it's a fear to live in a positive reality. And I think you guys have talked about this like before. Like, you start climbing that mountain once you're at the bottom, right? Like, I'm not in hell anymore. I've crawled out of that pit, but now I'm at the base of a mountain. What happens if I fall off that mountain once I start climbing?
It'll hurt a lot more.
Yeah. It's gonna break bones. It's gonna do all these things, right? And it's like it seems so dumb, but like there's little like reassurances in my head. It's like, what if you just don't? And it sounds so dumb, but like there were points in my day that I was just like, what if I just was consistent? What if I just decided
Take that risk.
Yeah, like what happens if I ask the Lord to persevere every day, you know, and like genuinely throw all of my weaknesses at his feet? Like, this is all I have. I literally cannot do this without you. Please come and help me. And I want to get rid of any distraction that pulls me away from that attentiveness throughout the day. And so it's really like it's just the little attentiveness throughout the day. It is the little loves. It's about being super intentional with little, like really tiny things, like for others. It's that bite the lip, you know, or like not complain when your mom tells you to do something. It's the, hey, you know, I'm at the grocery store, let me buy an extra chocolate for my friend or something. Or I see someone like being mindful of others, even like.
Well, it's the courage to say, like, what if that just became who I was?
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like
that attentiveness to the little things, like I've experienced in spurts, and then I fall off, and so I have this thought that, like, yeah, it's not manageable, right?
Yeah.
But like, what if it was?
It's about like not giving a crap about what other people think as well, because you're like, oh, that looks weird if I'm too kind to someone, right? Like we have this opposite fear of like positive reality is like, what if I'm too nice? Like, is that perceived as weird? Like, what if I give someone the wrong idea? What if I, like, you know, I don't want to be, like, pushy on someone emotionally, but, like, I want to let them know that I'm there for them, and then, like, we can get insecure about that, or, like, oh, what if that, you know, that person doesn't think they're as close to me as I do, or something like that. Like, we have these other demons, right?
There's a courage that moves you to just do that anyway.
Exactly. Right? It's about pushing past, and that's why I think I talked about, like, little fears, like, it's learning to push back the little fears, being mindful of, like, what's going on, right? And that comes from, like,
so, like, the route out of the apathy is actually, like, accepting that your reality is hyper infused with meaning, and the little things actually, like, matter a lot. And, like, the apathy will tell you nothing really in the abstract, or just whatever, nothing really matters. And so there's this inattentiveness, this sort of cold indifference that you come to the world with. But the route out of the apathy is this courage to accept that maybe the Lord's asking everything that I do to be imbued with meaning. That's a weight and a burden to accept. Yeah. But it makes it meaningful. Yeah. It makes life meaningful.
But that's the yoke, right?
And maybe life was already meaningful, but it allows you to come into tune with that. No, but that's reality.
Good. Like, go ahead, speak on that.
But I'm telling you, like, the yoke is lighter than you think.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay.
Like, you don't realize how much you live in your head until you live in reality.
Spit that verse, though.
Which one?
Like,
my yoke is
easy, my burden is light.
I'm going to tell you that in the past, like, 9 months, like, it is. Like, there's been really hard parts, but it's light when you put it at his feet, and you don't believe the lies that come into your head, and you be attentive to little things in your day. You go and you talk to him, and then you listen to him. You don't just talk at him, you talk to him, and you listen to God. And you have to lay everything at his feet. Like, there's a reason the mendicant orders take poverty, chastity, obedience. Like, because the Lord came into the world in poverty, he came into the world in chastity, and he came into the world in obedience to the Father. He gave him everything. And it's like, every day I'd fail to give more of myself, or days where I couldn't do that very well, like, I'd feel bad. But it's like, the Lord still loves me in this, and sitting here in this apathy or this wallow pit of self-pity,
it's what most of it is.
Exactly. It's like, it's not what the Lord desires for me, and it's not what's going to make me happy. He understands that I am on a path, and he loves me through it. He wants me to get back up, because as his son, he chastises me in this life so that I don't end up in hell in the next one.
Or in this one.
Right? Yeah, he doesn't want you to live in a hell in this world either. And it's like, those chastisements are usually pretty light if you're paying attention.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, it was that every day. I was like, I have imposter syndrome at this corporate job that I have. You know, I'm learning things I never knew before. I feel like I'm a fraud. Just do it one more day.
Yeah.
Like, live in the present. What are you learning right now? What are you doing to overcome that? What are you giving 1 cent towards to make your, $1,000 investment? Like,
that comes into the talent sort of thing too,
yeah.
Right? The talent parable.
So what are you doing with your talent? Are you burying it? And that's where your apathy is.
So it's like like the way out of apathy then is like, when faced with a world full of meaning, which before you've taken it on looks like a yoke,
right?
Like, it looks like a burden, looks like a cross from the outside when it's not on your shoulders. But then it's like, when you suddenly step in and push past the fear of, like, I'm going to live my life not just with meaning, but, like, see everything around me as having meaning. Mm-hmm. Then it's like,
it's freeing.
Yeah, just rest.
And live in that meaning, though. Don't just, like, there's that initial part of, like, rest and, like, appreciating, but, like, go live in it.
Yeah.
Go enjoy it.
Like,
go enjoy it.
It's playful. It's like playful in the sense of, like, it's dynamic, but there's a sense of rest in it. Like, it doesn't have a purpose. It's just, like, obviously it has a purpose, but, like, in the sense of just, like, yeah, like, this meaning is such it seems so challenging to, like, because the temptation to sin is to say, this doesn't have any meaning, I'm just doing stuff,
right?
Especially, like, nowadays, like, oh, it doesn't mean anything to, like,
say these words,
or
do
do these things or anything like that. That's like the neutral kind of lie. But it's like, and so we live with one foot in that world and one foot, I think as like Catholics, and this is my own experience too, is like we live with our foot one foot in the world that's passing away, which isn't actually the world. It's just our decision to view the world as meaningless, as I'll do whatever I like. It doesn't matter what I do because I'm going to do what I do. And then we live our other foot with this world that's just pregnant with meaning.
Yeah. And it's that potency versus act distinction that's important, because it's like what causes our fear and anxiety. It's the potentiality of like what's happened to me in the past and what may happen to me in the future, both of which are not real, not having.
It's the realm that lies.
So yeah, exactly. It's like
upon you.
Live presently. Like, do the good now. Don't wait. Like, do the good now. And I still struggle through this a lot. Like, I don't need to be waiting till I'm a professed brother or like in seminary or something to be doing good things. Like, I have months left. Like I have a couple months left. Why am I waiting? Like, why am I not doing, more of what I desire? Right? It's not just like I need to prove my love for God. It's like I love these things now. Like, I love what God loves.
Yeah. And I think it's like accepting that within yourself, that like within the apathy, to bring it back to that point, it's like, no, I love what God loves. I do. And this doesn't mean nothing to me. It actually means a lot to me, because I'm built in his image and he's calling me to be like him, and he loves everything. And everything means something to him in like a deeply rich way. And I'm like that too. That's terrifying in some way, I guess. I guess you're like...
do things that remind you of God.
And that's terrifying, because we want to live in a world that doesn't have God in it, right? In some way. Because then there's some other... At least...
Because then his whole thing about merit can hold sway in a world where...
And we can still think
it's
that
not
God
like
exists.
pregnant with God.
Yeah.
Because like then I can earn and prove and conquer and have control. And like discipline doesn't mean control in the healthiest sense. Mm-hmm. And so like
it means consistently living in reality. Like,
but the reality is that like you're not God and things mean something.
Exactly.
So that apathy is just breeding so many lies.
Yeah, I'd say thank you.
Will you allow me two self-indulgent etymologies?
Beautiful. Yes.
No, but I think it's like okay, discipline, right?
Yeah.
Discipulus, to be taught, a student. Like, it's like discipline isn't about what you do, it's about what you receive. It's about being taught. It's your openness to being taught. And then like it's especially striking because you were talking like, yeah, I can live that goodness now, but there is something about like, why do you put on a habit, right?
Yeah.
Like a habit, like the dress that you're wearing, like it's a symbol of like this decision to live with meaning, and it's something that you like put on
and like profess to the entire world.
Yeah. And it's like, obviously we all have those habits, right? Those courage, justice and stuff like that, but
you're connecting the habit as a virtuous thing to the habit of the clothing.
Because ultimately, like, if we all have those habits and virtues, like, that is our profession of living in a world with meaning and seeing the world as connected and God as ever present in it. But it's like, there is almost something profound in at this stage in my life, like, in a more profound way than ever, I'm putting on Christ and looking with his eyes at the world.
No, and you bring up one of like the most prominent prayers in my life that I think has definitely led up to a priestly vocation, is like, whenever I struggle, I ask for the eyes of the Father. Like, whenever I struggle to see someone that I'm, not liking at that moment, whenever I'm struggling to see past a situation, like, whenever I need to see something that I'm just not seeing through, I ask for the eyes of a Father. I ask to view people through the lens that he does. even if it's just like in ministry, even if it's someone I'm like not beefing with or anything, it's just kind of like, how do I love you not just as like a Anthony with his selfishness, is like, how do you see this person so that I can love them the way that you see them, or like you want them to be loved? And it's like, that's been the most prominent prayer, and it's beautiful, and I believe it's been like answered so many times, like in mass or like with my family or when I hang out with my nieces or nephews or things like that. Like I feel a strong fatherly instinct to the people around me in various ways, but it's not the same as like simply like a biological father. Like I think the Lord has put a spiritual fatherhood in my heart, and I think it does kind of stem from that prayer that he put on my heart to see the world the way he does. So.
Beautiful. Yeah. I think we're at like
an
hour 30, hour 40. Do you have any final remarks, brother?
Because in summary, this last part is in some, like, we could ask, where's your calling? What was the moment you experienced your calling? But like what you just said is like that the calling is the decision to live that way.
The calling is now. Yeah. Right now. You're called to holiness now. So do it now. Like your vocation, your big V vocation, don't sit there. Like Father Richard said this one time, like guys will sit in a room and gather all the data of their life and be like, okay, what am I meant to do? And things like that. And it's like, okay, there's some useful amount of reflection on that, but ultimately it's like, it's living in reality that you find what you're really supposed to do.
Yeah. And ask for the eyes of the Father.
Exactly. Ask for the eyes of the Father, get a community, and learn to love people every day. Like that's, like, it's so simple, and yet we make it so difficult.
Because we want to live in the other world.
Yeah, we want to live in the other world. We're afraid, our wounds, etc. And it's like, just don't refuse to live in that world. Refuse to live in that world. And tell yourself that you are willing to do what's necessary to do the will of God. Like, tell yourself that every day, and those obstacles become less. Like, I'm willing to lay everything on the line, even my life today, for this, for you.
Amen.
So,
boom.
Yeah. Boom. Let's give a little plug. Let's give a little plug to the Dominicans, fathers, the order of preachers, the LPs,
the OGs
and OPs. That's what it is. You can find them at DominicanVocations.com. This is my vocations pitch. Go be a priest.
Yes.
Your wounds can't your wounds don't mean you can't.
Leave them women alone, boys.
But
and find something much greater.
Yes.
You are called to greatness.
But also, women are essential in the discovery of this, I guess.
I'm just kidding.
Exactly. We
will have a woman on this podcast eventually.
Shout out Mama Mary, who's been here the whole time.
Amen.
Mama Mary.
Amen.
Yeah, she's been on our hearts.
I just want to say I felt God in this Chili's tonight. Like this was.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you for this. This is gonna be great to share. This is an exciting.
Cheers, friends. All right, I'm gonna shut it off.
Love you all.
See y'all.
Yes.
Kisses.